I used to think my mother loved me unconditionally. Growing up, it was just the two of us after my father passed away when I was 8 years old. Sarah, my mom, would sit with me every night helping with homework, and we would cook dinner together, laughing over burnt pancakes and lopsided birthday cakes. Those were the days when I believed family meant forever. Now at 32, as a successful marketing director with my own house and a life I built from nothing, I look back at the moment everything changed. It was the day my mother chose her new family over me, kicking me out at 16. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button. If you believe family should mean unconditional love, and subscribe, because trust me, you will want to hear how this ends. Now let me take you back to when everything changed forever. When I was 15, life was not easy, but it was good. My name is Adriana, and after losing my dad to a heart attack, my mom Sarah and I had created our own little world. She worked 2 jobs as a nurse and a weekend receptionist at a dental clinic, and I helped out by babysitting the neighbors' kids for extra money. Our tiny apartment was cramped with hand-me-down furniture and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, but it was home. Sarah was 43 then, with tired eyes but the warmest smile that could light up our small living room. Every evening she would come home exhausted, but she always made time for me. We would sit at our wobbly kitchen table, and she would help me with my algebra homework, even though math was never her strong suit. She believed in my dreams of going to college, something she never had the chance to do herself. We would talk about my future, about how I wanted to study business and maybe open my own company one day. Those conversations filled our tiny space with hope bigger than our circumstances. The loneliness in my mother's eyes became more noticeable as months passed. She was still young and deserved happiness after years of struggling alone. When she started mentioning a man named David she had met through a dating app, I was genuinely happy for her. She deserved someone who would appreciate her kindness and the strength it took to raise me alone for 7 years. David was 45, a divorced father of 2 who worked in real estate. He had money, that much was clear from the first time we met him. His car was a sleek black BMW, and his clothes looked expensive in a way that made our thrift store finds seem even more worn. When he took us out to dinner at an upscale restaurant, I watched my mother's face light up as she ordered something other than the cheapest item on the menu for the first time in years. His children, Marcus and Stella, were polite during our first few meetings. Marcus was 12, a serious boy with dark hair who spoke mainly to his father. Stella, 10 years old, with curly blonde hair, was chattier and seemed sweet enough. During those early dinners, I tried my best to connect with them, asking about their schools and hobbies. Marcus played basketball and was apparently quite good at it, while Stella loved art and wanted to be a painter when she grew up. I noticed how David's presence changed my mother. She started wearing makeup more often, buying herself new clothes, despite our tight budget. She would spend hours on the phone with him, her voice softer and more giggly than I had heard in years. Part of me was thrilled to see her happy, but another part felt a strange uneasiness I could not name. The change became more obvious when David started staying over on weekends. Our small apartment felt even smaller with his large presence. He was polite to me, asking about school and my grades, but there was something in his eyes that made me feel like I was being evaluated rather than welcomed. When Marcus and Stella would visit, the apartment became crowded and tense. They were not mean to me, but they treated me like a piece of furniture they had to navigate around. One evening, as I was doing homework at the kitchen table, I overheard David and my mother talking in hushed tones on the couch. I caught fragments of their conversation about space, about the future, about what made sense financially. The way David spoke about our situation made it sound like a problem that needed solving, rather than a family that could be blended with care and patience. My mother started coming home later, spending more time at David's house. She would tell me she was just helping him with dinner, or spending time with Marcus and Stella to build a relationship with them. I understood this was important. but our own dinners together became rushed affairs with her mind clearly elsewhere. Our homework sessions grew shorter, and sometimes she would fall asleep on the couch before we had a chance to talk about our days. When my mother announced that we were moving in with David, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. The practical side of me knew this would solve our financial struggles. David's house was beautiful, with a large kitchen, a spacious living room, and a yard I had only dreamed of. But something in my gut told me this transition would not be as smooth as my mother hoped. The house tour revealed the first major issue. There were only 3 bedrooms. David had the master bedroom. Marcus had his own room filled with sports posters and trophies, and Stella had a princess-themed room with more toys than I had ever owned. I would be sharing Stella's room, sleeping on a twin bed that David had purchased for me. It was generous, but it made me feel like a temporary guest rather than a family member. Moving into David's house felt like stepping into someone else's life, where I was constantly reminded I did not quite belong. The first morning I woke up to find breakfast already prepared for Marcus and Stella, while my mother was rushing around getting ready for work. When I asked about breakfast, David pointed to a box of cereal and told me to help myself. It was not unkind, but it was different from how the other children were served their pancakes and fresh orange juice. The house rules became clear quickly, though they were never explicitly stated. Marcus and Stella had designated snacks in the pantry that were off limits to me. When I accidentally ate one of Marcus's energy bars, David pulled me aside and explained that those were special items for the athletes in the house. I was not an athlete despite having run track at my previous school. There was no money for me to join the new school's track team because the fees were too expensive. David complained to my mother about expenses more frequently than I was comfortable with. I would hear him talking about the increased grocery bills, the higher electricity usage, and the cost of adding another person to his health insurance plan. These conversations usually happened when they thought I could not hear them, but sound traveled easily in the house, especially when I was trying to fall asleep on the other side of Stella's thin bedroom wall. My mother began changing in ways that hurt to watch. She started speaking differently, using words and phrases I had never heard from her before. She bought new clothes that matched David's lifestyle, trading her comfortable nurse scrubs for trendy outfits when she was not working. She even changed her hair, cutting off the long brown waves I had always loved and replacing them with a shorter, more sophisticated style that David complimented. The distance between my mother and me grew wider each day. She was always busy with David's schedule, attending his work functions and social gatherings where children were not welcome. Marcus and Stella were often invited to spend time with David's extended family, but these invitations never included me. I spent many weekends alone in the house, while they attended barbecues and birthday parties with David's relatives. School became my refuge, but even that was affected by our new living situation. At my old school, I had been active in the debate club and student government. These activities required staying after school and weekend commitments that David deemed unnecessary expenses. When the debate team needed money for travel to competitions, my mother regretfully told me we could not afford it. That same week, Marcus received new basketball shoes that cost more than my entire school wardrobe. The unfairness became impossible to ignore when Stella started taking piano lessons and dance classes. She deserved these opportunities, but watching my mother drive her to lessons while telling me we needed to cut back on my extracurricular activities felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I had been saving money from babysitting to buy art supplies for a class I wanted to take, but those funds had to go towards school supplies instead because there was no room in the budget for my needs. Marcus made his feelings about me clear through small acts of territorialism. He would walk into rooms and turn off shows I was watching, claiming he had been planning to use the television. He would take up the entire kitchen table with his homework, making it impossible for me to use the space. When his friends came over, he would introduce me as David's girlfriend's daughter, not as his stepsister. The distinction was subtle, but pointed. The emotional isolation was worse than the practical inconveniences. During family movie nights, I would sit on the floor while Marcus and Stella curled up on the couch with my mother and David. During dinner conversations, topics revolved around Marcus's games and Stella's recitals, while my achievements at school went unnoticed. When I tried to share news about making the honor roll, David would nod politely and then immediately change the subject to something about his children. My 16th birthday approached, and I was excited despite everything. Birthdays had always been special between my mother and me. She would wake me up with breakfast in bed, and we would spend the day doing whatever I wanted, usually ending with a homemade cake and a small gift she had saved up to buy. This year would be different because of our living situation, but I hoped it would still be memorable. Instead, my birthday was forgotten entirely. I woke up to an empty house because everyone had left early for Marcus's basketball tournament. There was no breakfast, no card, no acknowledgement of the day. When they returned that evening, arms full of fast food from the tournament concession stand, my mother suddenly remembered. The guilt on her face was painful to see, but David quickly distracted her with stories about Marcus's game-winning shot. That night, I lay in my small bed listening to the family celebrate Marcus's victory in the living room below. Their laughter and excitement felt like it was happening in a different world, one where I was not welcome despite sharing the same roof. The realization that I had become invisible in my own family was devastating, but it was nothing compared to what I overheard 2 weeks later. I had come home early from school with a headache and went straight to my room to rest. Voices from the master bedroom carried clearly through the walls, and I heard David and my mother discussing their future. David's voice was firm, as he explained that supporting 3 children was financially impossible. He talked about Marcus needing money for summer basketball camp and Stella wanting to audition for a prestigious dance academy. Then he said the words that shattered my world completely. David told my mother that I was nearly 18 and needed to learn independence. He suggested that I should get a job and find my own place, explaining that Marcus and Stella were their priority now because they represented the future of their family. My mother's response was weak, mentioning that I was still in high school, but David dismissed this concern by saying plenty of kids worked and went to school simultaneously. The next morning, I confronted my mother while David was at work. I told her exactly what I had heard, watching her face crumble with the realization that I knew about their plan. She tried to explain that David was just thinking out loud, but I could see in her eyes that the decision had already been made. When David came home that evening and found us talking, he did not deny anything. Instead, he sat me down and explained that it was time for me to grow up and take responsibility for myself. According to David, I was old enough to work full-time and support myself. He presented this as an opportunity for growth, rather than an abandonment, but the message was clear. I had 1 week to find somewhere else to live because Marcus needed his own space, and Stella was getting older and required privacy. My mother sat silently during this conversation, occasionally nodding when David looked at her for support. The week that followed felt like a nightmare I could not wake up from. My mother avoided eye contact with me as I packed my few belongings into trash bags. She would start to say something several times, then stop herself and leave the room. I kept waiting for her to change her mind to stand up to David and choose her daughter over her boyfriend's demands. That moment never came. Emma, my closest friend at school, convinced her parents to let me stay with them temporarily. Her family lived in a modest house across town, and they welcomed me with kindness I had not experienced at home in months. Emma's mother, Patricia, was horrified when she learned about my situation. She made up the couch in their living room and insisted I stay as long as needed, refusing any offers of payment. Living with Emma's family showed me what a functional household looked like. During dinner, everyone shared stories about their day. Patricia helped all the kids with homework, including me, and never made me feel like a burden. Emma's younger brother, Tommy, immediately accepted me as a temporary sister and would save me the last piece of dessert without being asked. The warmth in their home made my mother's abandonment feel even more cruel. I found a part-time job at a local coffee shop called Sunrise Cafe. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a kind woman in her 50s who needed help during the busy morning rush and afternoon study sessions when high school students crowded in. The work was hard, requiring me to be there at 5:30 in the morning to prep for the breakfast crowd, but Mrs. Rodriguez was patient while I learned and always made sure I had something to eat during my breaks. Balancing work with school was exhausting, but I was determined not to let my grades slip. I had always been a good student, and I knew that college was my only path to a better life. During lunch breaks, I would sit in the school counselor's office, researching scholarships and financial aid options. Mrs. Henderson, the counselor, became an unexpected ally, helping me navigate the complex world of college applications without parental support. The hardest part was not having a permanent address. Emma's family was generous, but I knew I could not stay indefinitely. After 6 weeks on their couch, I found a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. The rent was cheap because the space was small, and the washing machines below made noise until 10 o'clock every night, but it was mine. Mrs. Rodriguez helped me gather basic furniture from garage sales and thrift stores. My 17th birthday came and went without any contact from my mother. I had hoped she might call or send a card, some acknowledgement that she remembered the day I came into the world. Emma's family made me a cake and gave me a small gift card to buy school supplies, their kindness making my mother's silence even more painful. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment and cried for the relationship I had lost and the childhood that had been cut short. Senior year brought new challenges as college application deadlines approached. I qualified for significant financial aid due to my circumstances, but there were still gaps to fill. I picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop and started tutoring younger students in math and English. Every dollar went toward application fees, test prep books, and the dream of escaping my situation through education. The acceptance letter from State University came with a partial scholarship that covered tuition and books. I would still need money for housing and living expenses, but Mrs. Rodriguez helped me find additional part-time work through her network of business owners. The business program at State was well regarded, and I knew it was my chance to build the life I wanted. College was a fresh start, where nobody knew my story unless I chose to share it. I threw myself into my studies, working multiple jobs to pay for everything my financial aid did not cover. My professors noticed my dedication, and several became mentors who guided me toward internships and networking opportunities. I made friends who became my chosen family people, who celebrated my successes and supported me through difficult times. By my sophomore year, I was working at a marketing firm as an intern, learning about brand development and consumer psychology. The work fascinated me, and my supervisors began giving me real responsibilities beyond filing and coffee runs. I discovered I had a natural talent for understanding what motivated people to buy products and how to craft messages that resonated with different audiences. During my junior year, the marketing firm offered me a full-time position after graduation. The salary was modest, but it was enough to live independently and start paying down my student loans. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business administration, walking across that stage with Emma's family cheering from the audience, while my mother's absence felt like a phantom limb. My career progressed faster than I had dared to hope. Within 2 years, I was promoted to senior marketing coordinator, then to marketing manager by the time I turned 25. I had a natural ability to develop campaigns that connected with consumers, and my work ethic impressed everyone I collaborated with. The little girl, who had been deemed a financial burden, was now earning more money than she ever thought possible. I bought my first house when I was 27, a modest 3-bedroom bungalow with a garden where I could grow vegetables like my mother, and I used to do in our tiny apartment. I furnished it slowly, choosing each piece carefully and appreciating the luxury of having space that was entirely mine. The guest room remained empty for a long time because I was not sure who I would invite to stay. Around this time, I met Jake, a software engineer who shared my love of hiking and terrible cooking experiments. He was kind and patient, understanding that my family situation was complicated without pushing for details I was not ready to share. We moved in together after dating for 2 years, creating the stable, loving home I had always wanted. My life was full and satisfying, surrounded by friends who cared about me and a career that challenged me every day. I had not spoken to my mother in nearly 8 years when she found me through a mutual acquaintance on social media. The friend request sat in my inbox for weeks before I accepted it, and then the messages started arriving. Sarah's first message was tentative, asking how I was doing and expressing pride in my accomplishments. She had seen photos of my house, my promotion announcements, and pictures of Jake and me on vacation. Her subsequent messages became more frequent and personal, sharing details about her life that I had not asked for. David had left her 2 years earlier for a woman he met at work, leaving Sarah to raise Marcus and Stella on her own. The irony was not lost on me. The man who had convinced my mother to abandon her own daughter had eventually abandoned his new family as well. Sarah was struggling financially, working long hours and trying to manage two teenagers who were accustomed to a lifestyle she could no longer afford. Marcus was 17 and hoping to play college basketball, while Stella was 15 and still pursuing her expensive dance training. The phone call came on a random Tuesday evening while I was making dinner. Sarah's voice was shaky as she apologized for calling without warning, but she said she needed to talk to me. The conversation lasted over an hour, with her pouring out years of regret and loneliness. She claimed she had missed me every day since I left, that forcing me out had been the biggest mistake of her life. But then came the real reason for her call. Marcus had been offered a partial athletic scholarship to a good university, but the family needed to cover the remaining costs. Stella had been accepted to a competitive dance academy, but the tuition was substantial. Sarah was drowning in debt and wondered if I might be able to help with their education expenses, since we were family and I was doing so well financially. The audacity of my mother's request left me speechless for several long moments. After 8 years of silence, after choosing David and his children over me, after forcing me to survive on my own as a teenager, she was now asking me to pay for the education of the same children who had been prioritized over me. The woman who had told me I needed to learn independence was now asking her successful daughter to rescue the family that had rejected her. I asked my mother to meet me in person rather than discussing this over the phone. She suggested a restaurant halfway between our cities, and I agreed. The drive gave me time to process my emotions and decide how I wanted to handle the situation. Part of me was still that 16-year-old girl who desperately wanted her mother's love and approval, but the stronger part was the woman who had built a life through her own determination and strength. Sarah looked older than her 51 years when I saw her at the restaurant. Her hair was graying, and there were worry lines around her eyes that had not been there before. She hugged me tightly when we met, and I could feel her trembling. For a moment, I almost forgot my anger and remembered the mother who used to help me with homework and make pancakes on Sunday mornings. During dinner, Sarah told me about the struggle she had faced since David left. The house had been sold to pay debts, and she was now renting a small apartment. Marcus was working part-time, but needed to focus on basketball and maintaining his grades for college recruitment. Stella was devastated about potentially having to quit dance, something she had been passionate about for years. Sarah painted a picture of a family in crisis who needed help from their successful relative. I listened to everything she said, then asked her to explain why she thought I should help. Sarah talked about family obligations, about blood being thicker than water, about how proud she was of my success. She said that helping Marcus and Stella would be an investment in their futures, just like education had been an investment in mine. The irony of her words was staggering, considering she had forced me to invest in my own future without any family support. When I reminded my mother of the conversation I had overheard between her and David when they decided I was not their priority and needed to leave, her face crumpled. She claimed that David had pressured her, that she had been trying to hold the family together, that she had made terrible mistakes she regretted every day. She begged me to understand that she had been in an impossible situation and had made the wrong choice. I asked my mother what she had done to try to contact me or support me during the 8 years since I left. Had she called to check on me during my senior year of high school? Had she sent a graduation card when I finished college? Had she reached out when she saw I was struggling as a young adult trying to make it on my own? The answer to all these questions was no. She had only found me now because she needed something from me. Sarah became defensive, saying that she had assumed I wanted nothing to do with her since I had never reached out either. She pointed out that I had built a successful life without her help, proving that I had not really needed family support. This comment revealed exactly how little she understood about the cost of my independence. I had succeeded despite being abandoned, not because of it, and the journey had been filled with loneliness and struggles she had never bothered to learn about. I told my mother that Marcus and Stella were not my responsibility. When David had insisted that they were his priority and I needed to become independent, he had made a choice about our family structure. Now that David was gone, the consequences of that choice belonged to Sarah and her chosen children. I had no obligation to rescue people who had never considered me family when it mattered. The conversation became heated when Sarah accused me of being selfish and vindictive. She said that Marcus and Stella were innocent children who did not deserve to suffer because of mistakes their parents had made. I agreed that they were innocent, but pointed out that I had also been an innocent child who was forced to suffer for adult decisions. The difference was that I had been family, and they were not, at least not according to the adults who made the rules. I left that dinner feeling emotionally drained but clear about my decision. My mother continued to call and text for several weeks, alternating between guilt trips and appeals to my emotions. She sent photos of Marcus at basketball practice and Stella at dance rehearsals, trying to personalize the children I was supposedly abandoning. When emotional manipulation failed, she tried practical arguments about tax benefits and the joy of giving back to family. The final conversation happened when Sarah called me crying, saying that Marcus might have to turn down his college opportunity and Stella would definitely have to quit dance. She accused me of having a heart of stone and said my father would be disappointed in the person I had become. That comment crossed a line because my father had loved me unconditionally, and his memory deserved better than being used as a weapon against me. I told my mother that this would be our last conversation about money. I had worked hard to build a life where I was surrounded by people who valued me for myself, not for what I could provide. I refused to enter into a relationship based on financial obligation with people who had shown me that love was conditional. If she wanted a relationship with me as her daughter, not as a source of funding, she was welcome to call. Otherwise, I needed her to leave me alone. The aftermath was difficult because cutting ties completely felt like losing my mother twice. The first time had been when she chose David's family over me, and the second was when I chose my own peace over her financial demands. I went back to counseling to process these emotions and work through the guilt I felt about not helping children who were facing educational obstacles. My therapist helped me understand that setting boundaries was not selfish, especially when those boundaries protected me from people who had already shown they would sacrifice me for others. She reminded me that I had succeeded academically and professionally despite having no family support, proving that other paths to success existed. Most importantly, she helped me recognize that my worth was not determined by my usefulness to people who had rejected me. The healing process involves surrounding myself with people who appreciated my presence rather than my productivity. Jake and I strengthened our relationship by talking honestly about family dynamics and the kind of life we wanted to build together. My chosen family of friends continued to celebrate my successes and support me through challenges, showing me what real love looked like on a daily basis. I learned that forgiveness did not require me to subject myself to continued harm or manipulation. I could forgive my mother for her mistakes while still protecting myself from her attempts to use me. I could feel sorry for Marcus and Stella without taking responsibility for problems created by adults who should have planned better for their children's futures. Sometimes the family that hurts you the most teaches you the most valuable lesson about who you really want to become. My mother taught me that love should never come with conditions or price tags. David taught me that some people view others as assets or liabilities rather than human beings worthy of care. Together, they showed me the importance of choosing relationships with people who see my value beyond what I can provide for them. Today, my life is full of genuine connections with people who would never ask me to prove my worth through financial contribution. The family I have chosen celebrates my achievements without expecting them to benefit others, and they support me through difficulties without keeping score of what I owe them. This is the kind of love I wish every person could experience, and it is the kind of love I plan to give to others for the rest of my life. Looking back now, I understand that my mother's abandonment, as painful as it was, gave me something invaluable. It taught me to rely on myself and to recognize the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can do for them. When David convinced my mother to prioritize his children over her own daughter, he inadvertently set me free from a family dynamic that was never going to serve my best interests. The path I walked was harder than it needed to be, but it was mine. Every achievement belonged to me completely because I had earned it through my own effort and determination. Nobody could take credit for my success or claim that I owed my accomplishments to their support. This independence born from necessity became one of my greatest strengths as an adult. My relationship with my mother remains complicated. She occasionally sends holiday cards and birthday messages, but I have not responded to her financial appeals again. Sometimes I wonder about Marcus and Stella, whether they managed to pursue their dreams despite the family's financial struggles. I hope they did, but their success or failure is not my responsibility to determine or fix. The chosen family I have built includes friends who have become sisters, mentors who believed in my potential when nobody else would, and Jake who loves me for exactly who I am, rather than who he needs me to be. These relationships are based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than obligation or convenience. They have shown me that the most meaningful connections in life are often the ones we choose rather than the ones we inherit. If someone asked me whether I regret refusing to help my mother financially, my answer would be no. Setting that boundary taught me that my worth is not tied to my ability to solve other people's problems or rescue them from the consequences of their choices. It also showed me that real love does not come with invoices or payment plans attached. The woman I am today was forged through adversity but strengthened by the love of people who chose to care about me without expecting anything in return. My success is not just measured in career achievements or financial stability, but in the quality of relationships I have cultivated and the peace I have found in knowing my own value. That 16-year-old girl, who was kicked out for not being a priority, grew into a woman who prioritizes herself and the people who truly matter. Sometimes family means the people who share your blood, but sometimes it means the people who choose to share your life. The greatest gift my mother inadvertently gave me was teaching me the difference between the two, and for that lesson, despite all the pain it took to learn it, I am ultimately grateful. What do you think about this situation? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who treated you differently than other relatives? Share your thoughts in the comments below because I would love to hear your perspective on when family loyalty should have limits. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and finding your own path. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by how useful they are to others. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is knowing when to walk away from people who do not value you. I hope you all find the kind of family, whether biological or chosen, that celebrates you for exactly who you are.